Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The hot weather we've been experiencing can bring hidden health risks. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Seniors are at greater risk of heat exhaustion, strokes, and falls during heat waves. KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco visited one senior center that is helping older people stay cool.
Dozens of seniors seek relief from the summer heat by spending a few hours inside the Salvation Army in Serra Mesa. They eat lunch, play bingo, and most importantly, keep cool. Inger Huffman has been coming here since January.
It's wonderful, wonderful. I mean, really. And it's not only you be cool, you also can be with your friends.
She recently learned about the health risks seniors face during the summer, including preventative tips.
That you need to drink water all the time or as much as you can and be in the shade and stay indoors, not be outdoors during the warmest, early in the morning and late in the evening. So education, that's what it's about.
Geriatrician Ian Neal says it's also important for seniors to be mindful of their medications.
A lot of people as we get older have to take medications that affect blood pressure. If we get dehydrated, can actually lower our blood pressure too much and put us at increased risk of falls.
Dr. Neal says that during hot spells, it's crucial for seniors to have a support system in place.
It's one thing if we get a little bit dehydrated and somebody is there to say, hey, you're looking a little off here, why don't you sit down and drink some water? But if there's nobody there to say that to us, then our thinking can become impaired from dehydration and from what's called heat exhaustion. And that can lead us to think that we're okay when we're not.
For Huffman, the time spent indoors at the Salvation Army is about more than just staying cool. It's a chance to socialize, connect, and find community.
And they get more than be cooled down. The most important thing, really, they be loved, and it just make a difference in people's life.
Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News.
Well, there may be some relief near the coast every night with the current pattern. 66 degrees, low clouds near the coast. It's as if the refrigerator door is open here with the Pacific Ocean on our doorstep. But inland areas stay very, very hot. Thursday, another round of excessive heat warnings, heat advisories for some. All of these are in effect at least through Thursday evening. If you head farther east into the deserts, some of the excessive heat warnings actually continue through Friday as well. We'll take a look at the weekend forecast coming up.
Hundreds of nurses at Rady Children's Hospital have voted to authorize a strike. KPBS reporter Katie Anastas says it comes after months of contract negotiations.
The union representing the nurses says wages at Rady's aren't keeping up with other hospitals in San Diego. They say employees' share of medical premiums has risen by more than 30% over the last 5 years.
We have seen people in recent years leave Rady's, which for a long time that was slightly unheard of because people loved working with peds. You were at Rady's because you wanted to work with the kids. But in this economic climate, that's not enough for people anymore.
The union has not announced strike dates. They would give the hospital a 10-day notice before it starts.
When and if we decide that we will be going out on a strike, the hospital will have 10 days to make preparations for that. I mean, 1,600 nurses going on strike, I would expect some disruption in patient care, but both sides are committed to making sure the patients are safe.
Chris Abe is the vice president of operations at the hospital. She says Rady's has proposed a 22% increase in salaries over 3 years.
We meet market and we exceed market. And with this package, we are going to be some of the highest paid nurses in Southern California and in California in general.
Negotiations between the hospital and the union continued today. They're set to meet again on Monday. In the newsroom, I'm Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
9 years ago, San Diego adopted a goal of achieving 0 traffic deaths and serious injuries by 2025, and that deadline is now less than 6 months away. But city streets are just as deadly as they were back in 2015. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says those who have lost loved ones to traffic violence see a city government that's asleep at the wheel.
Part of moving out here and living in a neighborhood like Hillcrest is that it's a walking community, and Josh was able to work in the neighborhood.
Scott Moore is remembering his best friend Josh Gilliland. The two moved to San Diego as a couple in 2001, fleeing the homophobia they grew up with in Kansas. They stayed friends after their breakup. Then, on the evening of June 10th last year,
Josh was walking to work, which was Cheers, a watering hole down the street in University Heights. In the same walk he stood for years.
A driver who was later charged with DUI ran a red light and struck Josh as he tried to cross El Cajon Boulevard. Josh died in the hospital 4 days later.
I don't think that I'll ever be completely whole again. We spoke almost every day, and it's just really difficult to I continue to want to call him and tell him something. There are so many things that I could only tell Josh, or that we would only understand.
Josh's death was especially painful because neighbors had been complaining about this intersection of El Cajon and Park Boulevard for a long time. It's enormous and confusing, and the streets are wide, which encourages speeding. Just a few months ago, a driver went off the road here and crashed into the fence of a brand new dog park, which still hasn't reopened. Scott sees Mayor Todd Gloria boasting about how many miles of streets the city is repaving, and it doesn't sit right with him.
Losing somebody when it could have been prevented, and knowing that other things are being funded, but intersections like this one behind me aren't getting the attention that they need. I mean, there's so many of them. We have a list of 15 most dangerous intersections, and this intersection didn't even make the list.
In 2015, the San Diego City Council signed on to Vision Zero, a global movement to end all traffic deaths and serious injuries. The city even gave itself a deadline of 2025. But the number of people dying in crashes on city streets each year hasn't budged. Last year's death toll was 62.
Unfortunately, we see nationally that fatalities haven't really dropped, unfortunately. Even coming back out of COVID and seeing normal types of operations and community experiences, unfortunately, we're seeing that those aren't dropping.
Bethany Bezak is director of the San Diego Transportation Department. She acknowledges the city will almost certainly fail its Vision Zero goal next year, but she says her department is still committed to improving street safety.
The Transportation Department continues to track and monitor with police department and make sure that we understand the highest crash intersections and where some of those safety improvements are needed. And then we're really focused on utilizing our in-house teams to be able to implement those quick and easy, quick build is what we call it, types of installations. That might be just a simple crosswalk striping.
These here are quick build projects, flex posts, and they're able to be put up in a matter of days.
Laura Keenan is founder of Families for Safe Streets San Diego. She became an activist after her husband, Matt Keenan, was killed while biking in 2021. We meet across the intersection where Josh Gilliland was killed last year, next to some freshly painted bike lanes. Keenan says the quick build safety projects with paint and plastic delineators are great for streets with slower speeds.
On streets where cars and drivers do exceed deadly speeds, they're not always sufficient. They get us, I think, 80% of the way there, but sometimes that extra 20% is life and death. And so we really want the city to focus on adding physical barriers when the travel speeds call for it.
Earlier this year, Keenan led a coalition that pushed for more traffic safety funding in the city budget. They got an extra $785,000. It's not nothing, but meaningful safety improvements to massive intersections like this one will cost a lot more. Scott Moore agrees that cheap and fast fixes are worthwhile, but they're not enough.
The bike lanes and the changes that are being made, it's awesome. It's stuff that we've wanted for so long. And there's so much good stuff happening. It pains me to see that nothing's done about some of the worst intersections in the neighborhood. And it just doesn't seem consistent with the message that the city has given us, that saying that they are committed to safer streets.
Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The NATO summit is happening now in Washington, D.C. The long-planned event designed to celebrate the alliance's 75th anniversary is now also a public test for President Biden, whose health and cognitive capacity have come into question. Julia Benbrook has the details.
World leaders converging in Washington for a landmark summit to commemorate 75 years of NATO, and to decide how best to support Ukraine amid the continued threat of a hostile and undeterred Russia.
The outcome of this war will shape global security for decades to come.
This summit comes amid mounting concerns in the United States and abroad about President Joe Biden's fitness for office after last month's presidential debate against former President Donald Trump.
Look, I have a cognitive test every single day. Every day I have that test. Everything I do. You know, not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world.
The U.S. has historically been the biggest financial contributor to NATO. And while Biden is a staunch proponent of the alliance, Trump purportedly threatened to withdraw from NATO while he was in office and has refused to commit to defending member nations that don't meet spending expectations, views he has maintained during his 2024 campaign.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
The political uncertainty in the U.S. leaves NATO countries contemplating what the alliance would look like if Trump wins the election in November. Reporting in Washington, I'm Julia Benbrook.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, what the newest data says about whether President Biden has a path to victory in November's election. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
San Diego's theater community is mourning the loss of Dea Hurston, a playwright, philanthropist, and advocate for people of color in the theater space. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne tells us her story and how her legacy continues.
One of my earliest memories is wanting to take tap dancing lessons. I thought I should be the little girl that's tap dancing next to Bojangles and not Shirley Temple.
That's Dea Hurston speaking to KPBS 2 years ago about her motivation.
And my mother took me there. They told my mother that they just couldn't allow little colored girls to come to the tap school. It was the first time I'd ever seen my mother cry because she couldn't overcome that and make my dream come true of learning how to tap dance. And that experience never left me. It's something that I have dedicated my life to, is access for children and for people of color to the arts on all levels.
Dea Hurston was one of the most incredible women I've ever had the fortune to know.
Dea Hurston died on Sunday night, 15 years after being diagnosed with cancer. She was 73.
Talented, she was focused, she was driven, and she was funny.
Christiane Kerner is the founder and executive artistic director of New Village Arts in Carlsbad. The center underwent a renovation 2 years ago, and when thinking of a name, Kerner's first thoughts turned to Hurston.
We really wanted to take a moment and acknowledge who we thought in San Diego was most deserving of the honor, who had had the biggest impact in the arts in San Diego, and without question, that was Dea.
The Dea Hurston New Village Art Center is believed to be the first U.S. center outside of New York to be named after a Black woman in the past 50 years.
Dea has served most theater organizations in San Diego. She was often the only or first Black person in the room, and she paved the way for everybody else who came after her.
Hurston never planned on becoming a writer. She discovered her talent after her cancer diagnosis and an accident, which left her immobile.
I could not comprehend information and I could not retain information, but I realized that I could still write. And so when I tried to get my life back, I took a class at Playwrights Project, and just something happened in that class and it clicked with me, and I knew at that point I was a playwright.
Her musical, 1222 Oceanfront, A Black Family Christmas, debuted in 2021.
I want to write about Black people doing normal things and having normal struggles and normal joys.
Miss Dea was very unapologetic to be who she was, to be a Black woman in this space, taking up space. And I'm very grateful for that. As a young Black woman in the arts, you know, she has taught me to be unapologetically myself. I feel like there's a lot of times we have to walk around, you know, spaces on eggshells, but no, ask for what you need and get your spot at the table. And that is something Miss Dea taught me for sure.
Kiara Hudlin oversees the Dea Hurston Fellowship Program at New Village Arts. The program aims to address the lack of paid opportunities for women, people of color, and underrepresented theater artists in San Diego. A legacy that the center plans on keeping alive in Hurston's memory.
Miss Dea left very big shoes to fill in San Diego County here at the Dea Hurston New Village Arts Center, but I have no doubt that we will fill those shoes. It may take some time, but we are going to do it through this Dea Hurston Fellowship here at New Village Arts, through working with our stakeholders continuously on this program.
A memorial service is planned at the Dea Hurston New Village Arts Center in Carlsbad at the end of the month. A chance for people to remember Hurston and her legacy.
And people say, well, how do you do it? You know, how do you keep going? How do you keep writing when you're fighting cancer? And it does tire you out, and it is a struggle, but it's being in this artist community that keeps me going.
Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
And KPBS's Midday Edition will have more on Dea Hurston's impact, her memory, and legacy. That's tomorrow at noon on KPBS Radio. San Diego County is being sued over its plan to build homes in a very high fire risk area of Lakeside. The property, known as Green Hills Ranch, is about 100 yards from Audubon and Adlai Road near Lake Jennings Road. It is considered a very high fire risk zone by CAL FIRE, and despite this, the county approved a plan to build 63 single-family homes there. But the environmental group Sierra Club says the county told the public and the homes would be built in a high fire danger zone, a level lower than very high. They're asking the court to throw out the approval.
Have a fair discussion, discussions among neighbors, discussions among citizens, discussion among public officials. And that can only take place when there's accurate information. We want to see robust housing built in San Diego County, but we don't want it built in the high fire zone of the county.
The Sierra Club claims that building homes there could impact greenhouse gas emissions, biological resources, and fire safety, among other issues. Our media partner KGTV reached out to the county, who says they can't comment on pending litigation. Creatures living miles under the ocean must withstand tremendous amounts of pressure. Any of us would be crushed there, but they thrive. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us some invertebrates they're called comb jellies survive it by forging a different kind of cell.
They're called comb jellies, though they're not jellyfish, and they are beautiful when exposed to the light. But where some of them live, 8,000 meters beneath the sea, there is no light, and they have to adapt to tremendous pressure.
And it's known that pressure has relatively strong effects on the behavior and the packing of these lipid molecules, these greasy molecules that make up cell membranes.
Think of cell membranes as plastic bags that contain and enclose cells. They also contain and separate elements within the cells. This graphic image shows how lipids are assembled to form a cell membrane. This animation shows them in action. What you can't really see here is lipids have different molecular shapes and they change under pressure, according to Itai Budin.
So what I mean by that is some lipids, they look like this Diet Coke can. They're nice cylinders. And so as you can imagine, those cylinders, when you have many of them, I drink a lot of Diet Coke, they pack together into a flat membrane.
He says comb jellies also have lipids that are triangular, like traffic cones. But what if they're under pressure in the deep sea?
So what pressure does is it will actually compress those chains so that they bunch up next to each other. And so if you have a lipid that looks like a traffic cone at high pressure, it'll look like a Coke can.
Jacob Winikoff is a deep-sea biochemist at Harvard who partnered with Budin on the study. He points out lipids that make up cell membranes can't all be Coke cans. For certain things to pass in and out of them, you need some lipids that look like traffic cones, or, if you play badminton, a shuttlecock.
What we see in the deep sea, comb jellies, is they have a different makeup of lipids. They've rearranged some of the atoms in these lipid molecules so that even under pressure, they're still shuttlecock shaped.
Given the evolution of cell walls in deep-sea comb jellies, they can't survive at low water pressure. They disintegrate. But their odd-shaped lipids are not just found at the bottom of the sea.
And it turns out that some of the lipids that are most abundant in the deep sea species, they also show up in our bodies, and they show up specifically in the nervous system in the highest abundance.
What are they doing in our bodies, if not responding to high pressure? That's a subject for a future study. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Well, the heat's still on. This has been a persistent and significant heat wave, a scorching heat wave in the deserts, but inland areas are very hot as well. Now, as we look forward into the weekend, the absolute worst of the heat will begin to fade, but it's going to be a very subtle change from day to day. So it's not going to rapidly leave us, but we'll begin to find a little bit of gradual improvements. And after 3 or 4 days of inching our way out of the worst of the heat, we'll begin to get a little bit more comfortable. Low clouds will cloak the coast every morning here with the current pattern, and that is par for the course in this part of the world, as you are well aware. Temps tonight down to around 80. How's that for a low in Borrego Springs? The heat is hot. 73 in Mount Laguna, Campo 66. Low to mid 60s for most of us, a little closer to the coastline. But as mentioned, this excessive heat warning is back with us, continuing through Thursday. Into the deserts, there are excessive heat warnings actually persisting through Friday, too. Heat advisories up into areas around Anaheim and parts of Los Angeles as well. So the heat wave is on, and there have been areas challenging and breaking all-time record highs in at least 5 or 6 different cities across the West. But it's been really hot, and the air conditioners have been humming along. There is a bit of an increase in fire danger. The winds have not been terribly strong, so that's been a good part of this, but it's very dry, very, very low dew point, and very dry atmosphere here across the interior. 119 degrees is our forecast this Thursday into Borrego Springs. The big thermometers there. Ramona barely out of the triple digits for the bulk of the afternoon. 99 here high there. 90 into El Cajon. Escondido 91. It's pretty steamy out there. And through Friday, there will begin to be an eastward nudge with the heart of the ridge just beginning to expand east and pull away from at least the northwest, but we're going to have to wait a little longer here into our part of the nation before we see more meaningful improvements. We will lose about 4 degrees between now and Monday for the coast, so that's a step in the right direction. Temps into the inland areas backing away from the 90s, still very warm next week. Into the mountains we go, and here we're going to drop down into the 70s. That'll be a nice change after some more time in the 80s. The deserts are still scorching, but we will see big improvements here by later in the weekend. Still, it's not going to be delightful. 106 to 110, still pretty hot. I'm AccuWeather's Jeff Cornish for KPBS News.
The 1981 film Time Bandits opened a portal to a wild adventure through time and history. Later this month, Apple TV Plus launches a series inspired by that cult classic favorite. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando has this preview.
Anyone who saw Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits will remember the moment a horse burst through a child's closet and exposed holes in the fabric of time. Taika Waititi was 6 years old when he saw the movie.
It freaked me out, but I remember loving it, but also being a little scared for Kevin.
Kevin is the young boy whose love for history makes him the perfect time traveler in the original film and now in the Apple TV Plus streaming show.
He's a history nerd, and so he knows so much about all of these different places, so it's an informative adventure.
With Kevin serving as our guide.
One of the special things about that character is that he's the only one who really knows anything, and he's surrounded by people who, on the surface, are expert thieves, or, you know, they've got this gang, and they're like, you know, they're sort of dangerous, they've got that kind of pirate element to them, but they're kind of bumbling around, and he really becomes the most valuable member of the team in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they rely on him because otherwise they don't know where they are, and they have to rely on this kid who they don't really want to be here.
Jermaine Clement is another one of the show's co-creators. He also gets to play pure evil.
If I ruled this universe, I would turn it inside out.
And Waititi takes on the role of the supreme being.
I know what you're thinking. He's gone mad with power. What's he up to?
The casting seems perfect.
And don't come down here telling me things that I told you and pass them off as new information.
Okay, but what people may not know is that it was a choice made out of necessity.
Yeah, we couldn't afford to bring people in from overseas to do a few days' work over 6 months. So we knew it should be someone local, and we were the most proximate people. But for a long time, we were going to play the opposite roles.
Well, either way, join Pure Evil and the Supreme Being, as well as Kevin and his ragtag gang of time-traveling companions for Time Bandits. The 10-part series premieres July 24th on Apple TV+. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years.
Oh,
Call
nothing that I...
or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Brothers Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.